Hello, and welcome to Lit by Moonlight, where it's not a phase to protect Shelley Duvall at all costs.
Correct.
Protect her.
Protect her.
Protect her!
Yeah. Jack Torrance had one job, and that's not to lose his job. But after a run-in with a student and a history of drinking problems that led to abuse, he seeks employment elsewhere, and that elsewhere is the Overlook Hotel, a fine establishment that requires a caretaker during the harsh winter months where the hotel lays deserted in the Rocky Mountains. All Jack has to do is keep the boiler from overheating and keep the place clean while his family takes up residence in one of the rooms. Easy enough. That is, if this hotel wasn't plaguing his 5-year-old son with horrid images of red rum.
Red rum.
Red rum. Hi, my name is Kaitlin, and I am once again asking the outdoors what I did wrong to deserve their wrath.
Do you think that this cold is indeed allergy related?
Yes, ma'am. Because it is cold here now, and but sometimes it's not cold. So like some days it's like 60 and beautiful, and the next day it's 40 and beautiful. Yeah. And my little insides are like, what is going on? And I don't have an answer for them other than the outdoors hates you, and that's
That'll
okay.
do it. That'll do it. My name is Emberlin, and I am in love with Maya Hawke. Maya Hawke, please date me and my boyfriend. We love you, and we want you to date us. Can you date us? That's all.
I hope she gets back to you on that, because I'm invested.
Do. I do. Oh, are you in? Are we forming what? What's the quadruple? A quadruple?
Sure.
Nice.
She seems cool.
Yeah, she is cool.
So, Emberlin.
Yes.
Was there a specific moment in this book, The Shining, that hooked you?
What book?
The Shining.
I came here to be really to cause catastrophe tonight.
I love it.
So, I almost read my name again. I just want to say
so I'm Emberlin, and I think that Maya Hawke.
I almost started right from the beginning. So, I guess just conferring.
Can I just say, my one neighbor has decided that 7 o'clock at night is the time to mow their lawn, and I'm really upset about it.
That's so funny, because my neighbor also decided this was the time to like move around all of his furniture in his house and like just do things up. Like,
so
yeah.
If you hear noises, that would be why. I just like he turned on I could hear the lawnmower like 5 minutes before we started, and I was like, now?
Right now. I
have one neighbor.
Yeah, one neighbor in like the entire world, and that's the neighbor that wants to.
And this is the time.
Thank you.
I thought you were just about to close it and be like, "Thank you for listening to Lit by
Well, we're done now. That's enough.
We decided.
No, but to answer your question, I suppose, I think at the beginning of this book there isn't really anything that hooked me per se.
Yeah.
Which sounds weird because there are some things that happen at the very beginning that kind of make you go, huh? Like, what's going on here? This is suspicious. But I think if you recognize the cultural significance of The Shining, the film, you sort of pick up on things and have an idea about what could happen. If you've seen, like, glimmers of images through time of, like, a guy running through a hallway with an axe or, like, slamming an axe into a door and yelling, here's Johnny, you know.
That's just me.
Or Kaitlin, or it's Kaitlin. You know, like, I feel like
everybody's got their hobbies. Mine just happens to be running through hallways with an axe yelling, here's Johnny. I don't know what to say. I don't see what the point is. I don't know why people keep telling me, hey, Kaitlin, that's dangerous. You shouldn't do that. Listen, it's all I
want
got.
you to know that if I was on Bumble and if everything you just said was like a voice memo that you put as like the answer to the question, do you have any hobbies? I would swipe whatever way I need to swipe to get on a date with you.
Oh my gosh.
For a quadruple. But like, no, like I feel like if you know a little bit about like some of the iconic symbols, like the twins, the ghost twins that have come away from the film The Shining, then like I feel like in no world where I'm a 24-year-old woman in America is this like a spoiler-free book. So I suppose because I went into this kind of knowing what could happen, that there could be a haunted hotel and a murderous Jack Nicholson located somewhere within. I wasn't really aching to find out what happened. I kind of knew it was coming, but not completely, obviously. And I think once we dive into the meat of the book a little more, namely the alcoholism, which is something I wasn't expecting, my ears started perking a little bit because I was like, oh, I see the vision. I see the vision, Stephen. I see the vision. How about you?
Well, not to make myself uncultured or anything, but as a 24-year-old woman living in America, this was not spoiled for me.
That's good.
I had no idea. I've never seen the film. The only thing I knew about The Shining, and I wasn't even sure if it actually was The Shining that this came from, was the Here's Johnny thing. Because, you can't avoid that, but I had no context for it. And I was like, I think that's from The Shining. I'm not sure. And I've seen the opening of this film because I was a music major who took music history. And so when I learned about Dies Irae, our professor played that clip. He goes, and it was even used in The Shining. And I was like, cool, I don't know what that is. So when it started today, I was like, hey, I know that. So that's all I had for this film. So it was really exciting to actually get into this book and find out what all the hubbub's about. Yeah.
Is it bad that, like, when that started at the very beginning, the Dies Irae, what is it, Dies Irae?
Yeah.
I thought, oh, like from Rent. Because, like, there's a part of La Vie Boheme where, like, it starts with that, like, in the background, and that's how I always knew that song. And then when I heard it in The Shining, I was like, oh, from Rent. So that's who I am.
My favorite use of Dies Irae is in Rogue One.
Oh, yeah.
Because, first of all, Michael Giacchino did put his entire soul into that soundtrack. And second of all, there's like a ongoing in one of the tracks, but it is played throughout the film. You just hear wop 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 wop, like repeated, and then it finally goes wah 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 wah, which is part of the Dies Irae thing. And spoiler alert, they all die at the end. And also Dies Irae is known as the Death March, so when you hear it, you know something bad's gonna happen. But anyway, not to somehow use my degree in this podcast.
Yay!
Yay!
It worked!
It was worth it. It was all worth it.
It's right behind her on the wall right now. It just like there's a rainbow comes out and like some sparkles.
Both
it glows whenever you
like,
use it.
Yay!
Yeah.
She's doing it.
I think mine's like crumbled up someplace in my bedroom.
Yeah.
I don't know where.
You don't need it. It's fine. Nah. It's a scam, guys. Anyway. My hook for The Shining was actually chapter 4, and this chapter is from Danny's perspective. And also, I really wasn't expecting to get multiple POVs from this book, so I was really excited when that started happening. But this chapter is from Danny's perspective, and it's when we start learning that he has an invisible playmate named Tony. And immediately I was like, hell yeah, this is about some ghost shit. And then learning that Danny has some sort of like psychological connection with people and being able to hear people's thoughts and kind of see the future. It was super interesting to me. And it's in this chapter where we first get a glimpse into what might go down at the Overlook Hotel. And when Danny sees a bloody mallet in his father's car, which immediately connects Jack to whatever danger is in their future. So I was like, time to find out what this is all about. And I was excited to get into the story of it.
It's funny you say that because I feel like I wouldn't have expected a multiple perspective book so early on. I feel like in the 70s, like I would imagine those books exist.
Yeah.
But when Stephen King was like utilizing that perspective when writing, I was like, oh.
Yeah, I also wasn't expecting it. I was just thinking it was going to be all from Jack. So then like all of a sudden Wendy started talking, and then Danny, and then, you get Halloran at some point too. And I just thought that was really cool. As someone who loves multiple POV books, I've said this before on the podcast, I think it's a smart way to do, as long as it's done well. I think it's it kind of makes the story deeper because you're getting into the minds of more than just the main characters. So
Yeah.
I'm always a fan.
Agreed.
Still not a fan of my neighbor mowing at 7 o'clock at night, but you win some, you lose some, friends.
So, did you have a favorite quote from The Shining?
I have a couple. My first is, monsters are real, ghosts are too. They live inside of us, and sometimes they win. And the horror movies that scare me the most are the ones where something very human is turned inhuman or portrayed as a monster, when really it's something that could very well happen in real life. And this quote really brings that idea to light, because at the heart of the hauntings, Jack's past and internal struggle are what drive him to go mad and do the things that he does. So it was really interesting to see that played out.
Yeah.
I also liked the quote, the tears that heal are also the tears that scald and scourge, because damn it if I don't love a good cleansing cry session.
Sometimes you just need to cry it out.
Yeah.
While anticipating that perhaps your family's going insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. I say that a lot. That's like a common quote, a common Emberlin catchphrase.
Rolls right off the tongue, that one does.
Doesn't it?
And then, see, what I have to do is have to be like, guys, stop crying. It's just me with the axe. I told you this is my hobby. Just let me express myself.
I guess the same could be said, though, about your neighbor, lawn mowing.
That's true.
Yeah.
Except it doesn't, because I'm really mad at him for choosing 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night to do this.
That, I mean, use your axe, your axe marching to your advantage. Go over there and
be right back, guys.
Whip one at his lawnmower. Yeah, I feel like this book, honestly, like, in terms of just the writing, I feel like Stephen King has a really great way of, like, he's good at, like, internal dialogue.
Yeah.
And, like, description and, like, setting the scene for something. Like, he tells me everything I need to know that's important, which I appreciate. And sometimes things I didn't need to know, frankly.
Yeah.
But I felt like there was a lot of, like, scene setting here that helped me to understand, like, Danny and Jack and Wendy right from the beginning. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. It was very, like, reading it. I like it when I can easily picture something that's going on. And I feel like the imagery was really well done.
Right.
So it's this, have you read any of his other books?
I have. I've read it. I read it a really long time ago, like when I was a little baby. And that was pretty good. Like, I thought that was good. Like, there were things in it that I didn't appreciate.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of the way. I just think the way that, like, Stephen King, someone needs to take this man's keyboard away. Like, the way he writes about children, the way he writes about people of color, the way he writes about women, the way he writes. It's just, like, somebody stop him. Somebody stop his ass.
So you're saying he's doing a really good job, but sometimes he really does not do a really good job.
Yeah, like, he's doing a really good job, but only to the extent that, white men can do a good job. Like, to be fair. Like, revealing my internal biases, but, like, I mean, the bar's low. You know what I mean? Anyway. So, like, I actually read Dr. Sleep, which is the sequel to this. Mm-hmm. And I'll talk about that more maybe at the end, but I do feel like it's really interesting to see the way he conceptualizes The Shining today,
right,
through Dr. Sleep. And I'll talk more about it later, but just, yeah. Cool. How about you? Have you read any other books of his?
No, this is the only book of his that I've read. I said it last week in our Hill House podcast, but I don't normally go for the horror genre. It's just only because I feel like if something's going to scare me, I need to see it. And also there is a part of me that's just like, what if it scares me? And I don't want to, like,
and what if it does?
What if it does scare me? And I don't want to, like, start a book and have it scare me and then not finish it because I'm scared. So I just never really went for it. My mom, however, has read, I think, all of Stephen King's books. Like, she loves that genre and everything.
Ooh, she's not gonna like what I just said then.
It'll be okay. She knows everyone has their own opinions. So
she now knows that Stephen King is on my list of author enemies I have on this podcast.
It's okay. She told me some of the stuff that happens in it, and she's just like, why was that necessary? And I'm like, it wasn't. So
It wasn't.
I will never read that book. But I might read some of his other stuff. I don't know. I'm gonna talk to my mom and see what she recommends, because
what's good.
She's kind of like
tell
the
me
queen
what
of horror.
Teresa says.
Yeah,
tell me what Teresa says, because I feel like Teresa is a very reliable person as someone who's read a lot of Stephen King, like most of Stephen King's work, if not all of them. So
one thing about my mom is that she's the best. So
yeah, it's true. It's true. Hear. Like
hear.
It doesn't get better than
so
Teresa.
Hi, Mom, love you.
Hi, Mom, love you.
So what was your favorite quote?
For me, it was, and this kind of draws back a little bit to what we read last week, which was Shirley Jackson's Hill House. And here it is. Around him, he could hear the Overlook Hotel coming to life. It was hard to say just how he knew, but he guessed it wasn't greatly different from the perceptions Danny had from time to time. Like father, like son. Wasn't that how it was popularly expressed? And I love this quote specifically because of the personification of the hotel.
Yeah, that was cool.
Because I love horror movies where the building they're living in comes to life. That's why I appreciated Mike Flanagan's Hill House. That's why I have learned tonight, as of having just finished it, that I really appreciate Mike Flanagan's adoption of Dr. Sleep. And like, I just love when haunted space is personified. So I really, really enjoyed everything that was done there. So there's that. But then also from the movie, from the Stanley Kubrick film, I'm a huge fan of Jack Nicholson's iconic Wendy, darling, light of my life, I'm not gonna kill you, I'm just gonna bash your brains in.
Yeah,
there's something in that delivery that gets me to this day. I think about it at least once a day, like whenever like the other day when Vishwas woke me up from my wonderful lovely slumber that I was hoping he wouldn't wake me up. The other day Vishwas woke me up with it from a nap, and I really fucking wish he did not. The first thing I thought was, Wendy, darling, light of my life. Never the second part, obviously, but whenever I think like whenever I need to remind myself that Vishwas is the light of my life, I say that. Maybe that's not good.
That's really funny.
My therapist, hi Dana, my therapist is probably listening right now like, oh, that's probably not a good sign.
Dana's like, we gotta talk about this next week.
In the way that Ned Fulmer, all of like everybody's digging up Ned Fulmer's like business, one day like Vishwas and I are gonna like hopefully stay together forever, but like in some world where like we break up or something happens between us very publicly, people are going to be digging up this podcast and be like, this is where she said
she said that she was going to bash his brains in.
Or she said she was going to bash his brains in. It's going to come back. It's going to be like a TikTok sound. It's going to be super popular.
Yup.
Yeah.
Well, while we're on the subject of quotes, one of the parts in the book that I really liked, because we have just recently talked about Hill House, there's a line that says, the Overlook was having one hell of a good time. There was a little boy to terrorize, a man and his woman to set one against the other, and if it played its cards right, they could end up flitting through the Overlook's halls like insubstantial shades in a Shirley Jackson novel. Whatever walked in Hill House walked alone, but you wouldn't be alone in the Overlook. And I was just like, ooh, how fitting.
It is, and that's great because like Stephen King is obviously like heavily influenced by Shirley Jackson. He's like a huge fan of her work. So like I always like going back to what we've said a couple times in this podcast. I always love when like a creative is able to like pay homage to the OG when they want to like, you know, like just share like how much they love someone's work.
It's like when in the opening scene of, I think it was Get Out, that was literally like the same exact shot from Halloween.
Yeah,
that Jordan Peele used. I think it was the same street even. Don't quote me on that, but I watched that and I was like, Halloween. Like I thought that was cool. Yeah.
Or like with Scream, like I rewatched it the other day with some friends for the first time in a while, and I never realized just how much of a homage it pays to like all of the great slasher flicks. And it was just like amazing to like see all of like the differences, like see just all of the callbacks in Scream to like all these other films.
For those of you at home, there's a callback.
For those of you at home, that is also a callback. No, but yeah. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. I feel like we've done a pretty good job of both roasting Stephen King and praising him at this point, which I'm having a feeling is what the rest of this podcast is going to be exactly like. Taking a break from that. we have these playlists we do every week, and we put them on Spotify. You can go check them out at the link in our bio.
We sure do.
If we've even remembered to put one up, you know, like life comes at you fast. We're busy girls, you know, we're busy.
We're very busy.
We're very busy and important. But if we did, you know, we like to use this opportunity to talk a little bit about like soundtracks, music, the way that we perceive the scenes and the books in our heads. And I'm wondering, Kaitlin, what song would you play on the phonograph while you limp through the halls with your axe in a drunken stupor?
You mean my favorite hobby?
Yeah, exactly. Wow, I know you so well, and I didn't even.
You really do.
Yeah.
I would have the song "Tonight You Belong to Me" by Patience and Prudence playing in the background. So if you haven't heard it, take a listen to it, because, you know, without any other context, it's you know, kind of like a sweet song, and it's sung. Patience and Prudence are like 11 and 14 when they're singing, so it's this child's voice that's singing, and it's very cute and beautiful and very well done. But specifically, I love it when old-timey songs are used to create horror and like an eerie feeling, or even when like normally fast songs are slowed down to create an eerie feeling. Like I love that. I eat that shit up every single time it's used. I don't care how much it's done. I love it every time.
Yeah.
And especially if it's like being played on like a record player in the distance, it's just so chilling to me. And this song, it sounds like it's an older recording because it is. So I love that sound already. And because it's like a child's voice singing these lyrics, I know you belong to somebody new, but tonight you belong to me. It's very sweet, but in the context of the story, like I feel like if you put that song in this, it makes it
terrifying.
A whole new context and very terrifying. And I also love when you take a happy song and then you put it in a context you think it would never be used, and the lyrics take on a whole new connotation.
Yeah.
So that's the song that I would play. Because I think it's cool.
It is spooky. It is a spooky... That song has always scared the shit out of me. Like, I love it. I put it on all my Halloween playlists, but it's just... Ooh, like...
I like it.
Ew.
How about you?
I said Heartaches by Al Bowley, Sid Phillips, and his Melodians. And it's like a very old-timey song. It sounds a little bit like Midnight, the Stars and You, which is like something that's used a lot in the film. And it's also like been a very popular TikTok sound. And I remember after watching the film again thinking like, oh, what is that one song on TikTok that everybody's using for edits? It reminds me so much of this. And I like went on like a month-long search just to find this song, which reminds me so much of it. But yeah, I love the use of like classical music on a phonograph in the movie. It's so spooky. It's really what makes the movie scary. Like, as is the case in many other films, sometimes it's really the music that has the most impact on whether or not the film is scary, because if you were to play those same scenes back silently or like without the same music, they probably wouldn't be as interesting. So yeah, I love the use of that classical spooky music.
Also, while we're on the subject of music, I liked, because I did watch the film for the first time today, and while there was music throughout the film, I really enjoyed the moments where there was no music used. And I love it when like it doesn't take away from the film, but it kind of adds to the eeriness, and I feel like you see that a lot in horror stuff because there's just no music going on, so it almost takes out the idea that this is a story, this is a film, this isn't real, because you know, if this were happening in real life, like you don't constantly have,
there wouldn't be music.
And sometimes I feel like music can give stuff away, and maybe I can talk more about that when we talk about the film later, but the moments where there was nothing on in the background and you just heard the natural noises that were coming from them, I really enjoyed it, because I was like, aha, nice.
This is where I don't know what to expect. Yeah. Because that's the thing. Sometimes silence says more than music ever could. Facts.
Yeah.
Fast facts.
And that's a rock fact.
Kaitlin, is there a character you would force to take their medicine? A character you particularly did not care for in this book?
Yeah, Jack Torrance was on my shit list the moment we were told he's abusive, and he didn't really do anything to take him off of the shit list. So the one good thing the Overlook did was take him out of the game.
Get him, girls! Yeah. I don't know what that's from. I think I made that up.
It's from you.
Yeah.
So what character would you force to take their medicine?
I mean, obviously, Same. Jack Torrance needs to be put down. Like, he's gone. He's out. The man is the picture of unhealthy masculinity amidst husbands of the 1970s nuclear family, and he just needs to be put down. Like, somebody put him down. And, like, I will have to say the Overlook made the right move in ridding us of him, but still,
yeah,
I'm not rid of him.
Yeah,
I'm not rid of him.
He sure made some choices.
Yeah, he made choices. Is there a character you would... And I literally didn't even finish the question. I was like, blah, blah, blah. We all know it's Danny and Wendy Torrance. Like, if you had to choose people to protect in this book, probably them. But was like anybody else in particular that you liked?
Halloran. I really liked his character a lot. I love that. I really liked his character from the moment we met him because he instantly connected with Danny and bonded over the fact that they both have the shine, which is what they call their like psychic abilities, kind of. And I feel like I always like whenever there's a character in a story where like, okay, like our main character has this gift, but they can't really talk about it with the people around them. But then they meet someone who's like, I know what you're going through. And I like, you get to have that connection. Like, I was so excited for Danny to have someone, especially an adult, because Danny's 5, an adult who understands that, like, what he's going through and, like, the thoughts. And so, like, he can look up to this person and, like, you know, as a kid, you kind of usually trust most adults for the most part. So I think it was good for him to have an adult who's like, I see you, I understand you, I get what's going on in your head. So, like, I love that they were able to bond over that. And just the fact that he was told Danny, he's like, I'm going to be in Florida, but if you need help, you call me, with our little link there that we got. And that no matter what obstacle he had to fight, because there's a lot of obstacles on his way from Florida back up to Colorado, but no matter what, he was making sure that he came to Danny's aid. And I really like that he did not die in the end. Like, it was hinted that he might in the book. So that was a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
How about you?
Same. I mean, like, I was also very concerned about Halloran dying because I feel like that's, like, not dissimilar from the bury your gaze trope where it's like, oh, the one knowledgeable person of color whose life is completely dependent on the well-being of, like, the white people in the book is going to die at the end. And he didn't. I mean, I don't know how much that said, like, I don't know how much better that makes things just in comparison to the way that King treated Halloran's character for the whole other extent of the book. But, like, he was still, I think, like, a great character just in the sense that he was a decent human being that, like, tried to save Danny, and then when Danny called for him, did the very decent thing of coming all the way from Florida to, like, be with Danny and, like, I think that's wonderful. Like, because, I mean, as much as I'd like to say, because I've never been in that situation, hopefully I never am, but, like, as much as I'd like to say, yeah, I would have done the same thing. I don't know. Right. I might be a shitty person. I'm not going to find out, you know, until I have to do something like that, but...
You're all the way over there. I can't today.
I'm in Florida. I'm sorry.
I'm, like, on the beach right now. I just can't do it.
I'm sorry. I can't
You said it's snowing there?
No.
Had enough of that.
I'm not coming back for the snow. Yeah. Yeah, so it was really lovely that he came back for Danny and that he had such a great connection with Danny that, like, Danny had somebody there for him as he was going through, like, having this gift. And as he, for most of his life, he thought he was alone. So, yes, a good read. I think, like, that's kind of something that you start to dip into more in your first peek. Isn't that right?
As far as Danny goes, I really enjoyed that this wasn't a story where a child is hyper aware that the place he and his family are is not safe and just seeing things and the parents dismiss him and say it's all in his head. Like, it always bothers me in horror movies when a kid's like, this place is haunted, we need to leave, and the parents are just like, kids say the darndest things as their family gets murdered by ghosts. Like, it just bothers me so much because I'm just like, I don't know. Like, there are times in Hill House, like the TV series, where the kids are like, there's a bent neck lady, there was pounding on the walls, like, how can you not hear it? And all of your kids are freaking out and they're seeing all this shit and you just go, oh, it's nothing, don't worry about it. Like, I'd take those kids and leave. I feel like they know something I don't, and I'm gonna like, I hope that one day, if I am a parent, that if my child says, hey, there's a ghost here, I'll be like, okay, I believe you completely. What are they saying? Like, so it was nice that in this book, Jack and Wendy do try and figure out what's going on with Danny, and like they take him to a doctor to find out what's going on, because they think that maybe he's just like epileptic or something, because he has like these seizures, and he'll often just kind of be unconscious when he's actually like really like talking to Tony or whatever. But even like the doctor doesn't even dismiss Danny and doesn't really tell him that what he's seeing isn't real. He just tries to like make it more tangible for Danny to understand like what's going on in his head. And even if they don't really figure out exactly what's going on with him, but like at the doctor's office, but later on Jack and Wendy realize that he has this gift and that like he knows their thoughts, and they're like, wow, that's insane that he can do that, but maybe we can use that to his advantage. Like, hey, like, and Wendy's like, did you see your dad? Like, is your dad drinking? Like, can you tell me that? And like they just believe him and take his word for it. And I really like it when kids are believed.
Yeah, I was always very impressed by the amount of respect that the adults in this book give Danny. Yeah. As like a reliable source of information, but also just as a child, like with human emotions and feelings. Right. I've always appreciated that. It's so, I feel like, first of all, it's very interesting to see, I feel like, in the 1970s, where I feel like we have like a very like one-dimensional understanding of the dynamic between parents and kids during that time period. But like to the extent that like when I read that book, sometimes I'm like, wow, there are things in here that I wish my parents did. Just saying a lot, because the father in this book breaks his kid's arm. Like, yeah, you know, which obviously, like, when I say that, I'm looking beyond those points and just at the explicit way that they treat Danny's emotions. Yeah. Yeah. For me, I kind of exactly where I was just going just now, actually. I think I really, really like how much you can take away from this book today. When you think about the portrayal of masculinity and addiction in this book, like, wow, there is so much there that I feel like I was unpacking explicitly, thinking about Jack's internal dialogue and his resentment towards his wife, toward this younger student in the book, toward himself. Like, I feel like Stephen King captures the descent of an addict horrifyingly, because that's what it's like to be around an addict and an abuser. It's actually horrifying. And I felt that a few times reading The Shining. Like, it's not horrifying to the extent, much like with Hill House, it wasn't horrifying to the extent that there were ghosts. It was horrifying to the extent that there's like this internal, like the main character in this book is deeply troubled, and like there are a lot of very real things that they're going through that any person reading this book could probably also be going through, and that Stephen King himself was going through when he wrote the book. Like, it was a book that he wrote to help him cope with his own alcohol addiction. So,
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so, you know, like, I love the way that masculinity and addiction are portrayed. I feel like there's just so much to pick apart there. Not so much in the film, but in the book. That I feel like I took with me. Like, something that is talked about in another one of my favorite podcasts. It's called You Are Good. And it is Sarah Marshall and Alex Steed's podcast. And they talk a little bit about how what makes this book good in general, what makes a lot of King's works good, is that it's about like shedding light on the American human condition and using horror elements as a means of making the human experience dynamic. Yeah. And I like feel like I could not say that better myself, which is why I think I'm directly quoting them when I say this. I just feel like there's so much in the simple everyday things that we go through that can sometimes, you know, like without a little bit of self-care become terrible over time. Right. And that's what makes this book scary for me. Yeah. So very that's where I am. What was your second peak?
My second peak was that I love psychic connections. I think it's really cool. I totally believe that in real life people have them. I say that because I really genuinely feel like my cousin and I have one, because we have shared dreams.
Oh, cool. And, oh, yeah, I knew that. Why am I saying that like I've never heard it before?
Yeah, we've had like shared dreams, or at least like very similar dreams. Like, there was one time she texted me, she's like, hey, weird question, but did you dream about this last night? And I said, yes, I did. And then I described the dream, and she's like, yep, that's what happened in mine. And I was like, weird. And or like I just kind of know when like something's up. I just kind of feel it, and like even if I don't directly like call her out, I find out later. I'm like, oh, I was right. Like sometimes I'll text her and I'll be like, are you okay today? Like I feel like something like you feel like feeling a little off, and then she'll be like, no, I'm sick, and I'll be like, knew it. I knew that. So I think it's really cool, and it's not something that I can explain.
Wow.
And like not to sound like I'm an empath, but like because I hate that, but like there's just something about like being so in tune with someone that like it's more than just like, oh, I can finish their sentences. Like you can do that with a lot of people, but like it's such a deeper connection. I just think it's really cool. So to have a psychic connection like played out, like that's why that was my hook, to find out that Danny had something going on and he can like see things or feel people's thoughts. Like he knew that his parents were thinking of divorce, even though neither of them actually spoke that out loud themselves. Like I just thought that was so cool. And I don't know, it was just really cool to be like, just to get the information from Danny about what's going to happen, but like he doesn't understand it, and you're not given the full picture, but you can kind of take those puzzle pieces and start to make it yourself. I thought that was really cool. I also liked that by the time they got to the Overlook Hotel, Jack, Wendy, and Danny's POVs like all meshed together. Like there are still times later on in the book where it's like this chapter is specifically for Jack or this one specifically for Wendy. Right. But in the beginning it was chapter 1 Jack, chapter 2 Wendy, or what, and etc. But like by the time they get to the Overlook, it's like it starts out with one and then it goes into another, and sometimes it changes line by line, and I thought that was kind of cool. And I feel like that kind of like represents how the hotel's kind of getting into all of their heads at the same time and creating that stronger psychic link. So I just thought that was a really cool detail that King did.
That's so Raven of you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I feel like that's a really great point. And also great example, I don't know if we've talked about this at all on our podcast, of like the way that sometimes like just the sheer structuring of books can be useful to the storytelling. Yeah. Like what you're describing. Like I love that. Like that is cool. Like that's the equivalent of if I were to like write a short story about like walking upstairs and I just indented each line a little more each time. Obviously, I'm not cool enough to do that, but you get the idea.
A good example of that is Hafsa Faisal does that in We Hunt the Flame. Oh yeah. And also in the sequel to We Free the Stars, where it'll be like a word, a couple words is like, and then time slowed down, like all like in their own lines, and it just kind of like that itself kind of slows down the story, so it's like almost like it's all in slow motion. And I thought that was a really cool element that she did in her work.
It is. It's like poetry.
What was your second peak?
For me, I think what I love about this book is at its core, it's the epitome of modern American Gothic. Like, American horror, I'm going to get my soapbox for a second, is a place I wish I could live in subconsciously. Like, I want to go to there. Like, the middle of a cornfield or, like, an abandoned theme park or, like, a creepy mountain town hotel. Like, something we talk a lot about on the pod is like liminal spaces, and I always think of like fluorescent lights by your high school vending machine at night, or like a drained and abandoned community pool. Like places that it's like at the time that you see them, you witness them, they're kind of off. Like there's like an off feeling about it, but it's also familiar and nostalgic.
They're usually places that are like full of people, but then you see them when they're not, and it's like, right, this is not what the space was created for.
It's like urban exploring that a lot of people do, where they go to like abandoned places and they see them, like movie theaters. I feel like the scariest places are the ones that are like abandoned but they have stories. There's like this juxtaposition of the past overlaying and mixing in The Shining with the family's madness, which is like so intriguing. Like the way that like in addition to the hotel being abandoned, there's also like this party that happened one night long time ago, and like there's this, and like all of those things kind of interweave to the point where like Wendy's climbing up into the elevator shaft and finding confetti and being like, what's this then, Jack? Right. And that is so fascinating to me. It's like scary. It's like it's honestly, it's like the equivalent of if you were to like go through your grandparents' things and just find something really like random and like spooky and be like, how did this get here, you know?
Right.
So that's what I love about this book. What was there anything you didn't care for in this book? What was your valley?
Not scary.
Not scary.
Not scary. Not having seen the film and not knowing the story at all, I know that The Shining is one of the go-to horror novels / movies. So going into it, I was like, oh, I'm ready. I'm going to be spooked this week, damn it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. I still enjoyed the book, really loved the book, but I just was really hoping to have that feeling of like, oh God, this is scary. But instead I was just like, this is cool. I like this. I wonder what's going to happen next. But it just wasn't scary to me. And I just wanted to be spooked.
Yeah, that was kind of my reaction too.
I am asking politely to be spooked by one book.
Once again, I am asking to be... Have you ever read... I'm curious. Have you ever read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark?
Probably.
I'm going to bring those home. We're going to read them when we have our little Halloween get-togethers.
You know what? I freaking did because... But I was a child and my dad read them to me because I remember, I'm pretty sure he read it out of the book, or maybe he was just making up a story on his own. But I really feel like he was reading out of books. I remember him telling a story and he was like doing like sound effects with it. And I just remember however the story went, it scared me. And I just remember like my mom being like, why would you do that before she has to go to bed? She's 6. Hey, I'm editing now, but I did ask my dad about this story, and I just want to say, if you or a loved one have ever been traumatized by the story Johnny on the First Step, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Great story. Not good when you're 6. Thanks, Dad.
Do you ever, like, I love when, I feel like this is a thing, but, like, when dads create, like, a very niche, like, dad story universe with like only like the same tropes exist over and over again. Like my dad's thing was this thing called the ghost train, and it was like there was a ghost train and it would like go through all the railroads, and like there would be different like scary little ghosty boys on it, and like spooky like a werewolf or something, and it scared the piss out of me. I was like, you mean to tell me there's a fucking ghost train that goes through North America? And I haven't seen this on the news. Why isn't Katie Couric talking about this?
Why are we not talking about this? Yeah, my dad's thing was always like a creepy person, like or like some sort of creature was like lurking towards you, and all of a sudden he would always go bam, and like that would be like the build up of like it's coming towards you. Speaking of dads, I remember being over at your house. I remember we were watching some horror movie, and my dad we were watching a horror movie, and it was like it was a sunroom, or was it just like one of the rooms, like it had a whole bunch of beautiful glass windows.
That's our sunroom.
It was very important to know that Emberlin's dad is literally like in the woods. It was dark at night, we're watching a horror movie, and all of a sudden in the window there's Emberlin's dad with like a candle to his face, just lurking there. And I think about that a lot during October, of like, remember when Emberlin's dad was just like, I'm just gonna stand here and wait till they notice me, and we freaked out. It was so funny.
My dad is the king of subtly scaring you. Like I remember watching Hannibal once, and he did that in the window with a flashlight. I have a picture of it. I don't have to send it. But he just loves a good subtle thing. Like, he's not going to jump out from someplace. He's not going to, like, put something in you. He's just going to stand there, like,
and wait for you to
letting the lighting do the work and, like, scare you. Yeah, he's terrifying. But...
Meanwhile, my dad will just poke you if he knows a jump scare is coming, he pokes you so that you jump even more.
Yeah, so you jump. Oh, my God. Time. That's so funny. Yeah. I remember, I was going to say, I feel like the lore that dads bring in terms of like scary things, like that's like a whole other level of scary, and that's why I asked you about Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, because those are actually very scary. Like I don't know if I read them differently now, but I'm going to bring them and I'm going to read them to you guys. Please. And you tell me, because those actually fuck me a little bit. Like, oh my God. And then I think they just adapted it to a movie that Kara said was like actually like surprisingly good for like a horror film. Yeah. Anyway, sidebar.
Oh, that movie, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went and saw that.
Oh, was it good?
So here's the thing. I went and saw it with Sam, our friend Sam. She jumped at everything, and I was laughing at the entire way.
Oh, no. So, okay. Well,
I
that's
bring
sad.
the book because I want to see if it
I
hits
will bring the
different,
book because the
but
book hits so different. The whoever does the illustrations for that book.
see, sometimes the illustrations get me. I speaking of Sam, we were just watching the new Ghost Files episodes because they're back, baby.
Yeah.
And sometimes just the illustrations that they use in where you just see like a face kind of in the corner, like those creep me out. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like that's not supposed to be there.
That is scary to me. That is scary to me. When I think back, because like I'm thinking now, like, have I ever really been scared when I read a book or I watch a movie? Like, I've noticed even with a lot of like horror films. I used to be terrified of horror films, but I've been watching a lot of them this past 2 months, and I honestly don't know why I thought they were so scary because nothing really freaks me out that much.
I mean, you said The Haunting creeped you out, right?
Well, I was gonna say the haunting creeped me out. Like it was like ooh, ooh, but the haunting of Hill House, like Mike Flanagan's Haunting of Hill House.
Oh yeah.
The bent neck lady, that freaked me out. Like I think that is the most like terrified I've ever been watching like a film. Yeah.
That kind of set the bar really high because like it's the most I've ever been scared watching anything, and that kind of set the bar so high. So anything after it, I'm like,
You're like,
doesn't hold a candle. Sorry.
Yeah. If it's not Mike Leisha holding a candle, I'm not scared.
Then I'm not scared, baby.
I'm literally putting that on a t-shirt. I'm gonna find that picture and post it on our social media because I feel like
Please,
you have to know
I've
this
seen
happened.
it.
So yeah, for me, I mean, there's the obvious first and foremost in terms of alleys. Like, what am I going to tell you that you don't already know that I probably hate about this book? Like, I could say to you, oh, Stephen King's writing feels a little bit pretentious at times, but like he's maybe the Aaron Sorkin of horror, or maybe Aaron Sorkin is the Stephen King of political screenwriting. I don't know. Or I could say to you, Stephen King flippantly uses the N-word in his works and can't seem to get past the archetype of a black character whose primary purpose is to assist the white protagonist in like all of his books. Like there's a lot to unpack there that I don't really feel particularly qualified to unpack, but I think it's important to raise for further reading that like when it comes to authors that are writing really good horror books, may I suggest Ms. Shirley Jackson as an alternative?
Yeah.
Until somebody comes and tells me like actually Shirley Jackson sucks, which if that's the case, then I mean like please recommend me some good horror writers. I think in fairness this is a very good book. It doesn't scare me the way I thought it would, knowing it's one of the all-time great horror books, and I'll choose my words carefully because I'm not saying it's overhyped. I think what makes a good horror novel specifically for me is that feeling that as I'm reading it that I suddenly become more aware of my surroundings, and it like not by choice. And I didn't really get that with this book. And I've also just been wondering lately if like I'll ever be terrified by anything again after the past like 6 years of our lives. Like, can it get worse? Can I be terrified again? Like, can I feel extreme horror beyond like just looking at the news?
Yeah.
Can I?
No,
That's a genuine question.
not.
I don't know. Like, if you were to say,
not.
oh, like, there's a guy and he's got a bat and he's running through the hallway, I'll be like, that's great. That happens all the time now in every public place, but the man is usually holding a gun instead. Like, what am I going to say to you? Like, hello? Like, there's a spooky, like, sickness spreading over everyone. Great. That's happening here too.
Cool. Yeah. Seen it. Been there. Had it. Done.
Had it. What now? What's next? Huh? How do you read horror? How do you consume horror today when horror is life? When life is the horror.
when you're constantly living the horrors.
Yeah. Like that's a cynical take because obviously there's still lovely people and beautiful things in the world, but I do think like there is like a level of conditioning that comes with being able to read Stephen King in 2022 and not be like, this isn't the worst thing that's happened to me this week.
Yeah. Speaking of horrors, let's talk about this Kubrick film adaptation of The Shining.
Yeah.
What did you think of it? You've seen it.
I feel a lot of things about Stanley Kubrick's The Shining versus Stephen King's The Shining. Because I feel like the film is probably one of the most polarizing departures from the source material, and I'd argue in a different way than like Shirley Jackson versus Mike Flanagan's Hill House is. Like,
yeah, because that one was good.
Yes. Oh, and wow, I now know Kaitlin's opinion. And also because like, I mean, already like we know that like King and Kubrick had very like contrasting visions on how the film should have looked and what it should have been like. And Kubrick kind of said, no, I'm in control. And like actualized his vision for this film. And I mean, yeah. Going back to like You Are Good, which is again a great podcast, please check it out. On that pod they talk a little bit about how they describe the movie as feeling more like a tribute to the book, or like an AU fan fiction, than like an actual adaptation of the film. And like, yeah, I feel like that's the best way to think about it. Like
100%.
Because it doesn't feel super appreciative of the source material, but it sure feels like it had something to do with the source material, huh?
Yeah.
So what did you think about the film?
It was definitely a fan fiction of The Shining, for sure, because I just felt like, so I just watched it for the first time today, and first of all, I think I finally figured out what the Kubrick Stare means, so that was cool. Yeah. It cut to Jack just, doing the Kubrick Stare, and I was like, I literally said out loud, oh, is that what that is? Is that the Kubrick Stare? Is that what he's doing right now? Yeah. So there's that. There was a lot of things taken from the book. Like, a lot of lines were similar, or at least in the beginning, especially between Halloran and Danny. And I felt like the film version, Jack, it was more of like, he was always kind of a shitty person, which he was in the book, but in the book you got, and of course in the book you get his internal monologue, so you get that, but like you can't get that in the film because it's a film. But I feel like in the film adaptation of The Shining, it was like Jack is just a shitty person, and he's like slowly gonna just go more insane. And yes, he does talk, like you see him talking to like the ghosts from like the party of the Overlook Hotel like years ago, but like it doesn't read the same, because it felt more to me less of the Overlook getting inside all of their heads, and more of Jack himself just slowly going more mad. And so like I kind of missed that, and then I was kind of hoping to have more of Danny and his abilities, and like we see it a lot. I do think it was interesting to have Tony, like the way they introduced Tony, like he's the person who lives inside his mouth or something that he says, and he like uses a little finger and he talks like this whenever Tony wants to talk. And like
some choices there are made.
It was a choice, but I think it was a good choice, because how else are you supposed, like, otherwise it would just be a voice off screen in its head. So I thought that was fine, because it kind of made Danny a little bit like creepier as a child, because he has that going on. But I don't know.
Yeah, like it feels like Kubrick made deliberate choices that were more about his creative vision than maybe like the actual like the source material of the book, and like what the intended messaging and symbolism was in the book. And that was a little bit, I mean, like it comes to, if you haven't read the book and you just watch the movie, and if you're not like super hellbent on the movie and the book being the same, like it's a good movie. Like it is, like it's spooky as fuck. The scenery is great. Shelley Duvall is incredible. Jack Nicholson is incredible. Like the ending is kind of weird, but there's like a lot of iconic bits and pieces that come out of The Shining, the movie, that I feel like we even referenced today. The cinematography is pretty 100%. Good. Like I feel like it's good. It's good to the extent that like a classic film is good, like to the extent that say The Godfather is good, or to the extent that say Apocalypse Now was good. But I think like I don't know that a lot of what happened in order to create Kubrick's vision was worth it. I want to read you some factoids just about Shelley Duvall's experience while on the set of The Shining. So essentially Kubrick emotionally abused her throughout the entire course of the movie, which I think is well known now, but still something to bear in mind when you think about Shelley's performance in the movie, which, while objectively seems incredible, is also the result of like prolonged periods of abuse on Kubrick's part. He would have her shoot for like 15, 16 hours at a time. He'd had her do at one point a record-setting 127 takes. he was just all around disturbing to her. I do think I heard somewhere that it like really destroyed her vocal cords like permanently just from all the screaming that she did. And because Kubrick chose to shoot The Shining chronologically, like an insane person, the filming ended up being 500 days long, which is, again, like insane. God. Yeah, that is the work of an insane person. And like when you think about that, just in juxtaposition to like a character like Jack, who is like abusive and is essentially like torturing his wife and child in an isolated place, I think about that a lot because I just wonder, I think like a lot about like film theory where like directors make movies that are reflections of themselves. And yeah, like that's what I think about when I think about this movie. Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there. I want Shelley Duvall to be protected and safe.
Yeah, that's not how, like, I read somewhere that he treated her badly so that he could get a specific reaction out of her. Yeah. And that's not how you do that. You hire actors. That's what acting is, you know? Like that, especially when you're filming a horror movie and you're like, I want you to look scared, so I'm going to scare you, and I'm not going to tell you that Jack Nicholson is going to take an axe to the door because she did not know that. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that's not, like, it was when, like, she wasn't always informed what was going to happen on the other side of the wall, and I'm pretty sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, but him, like, she wasn't always aware that he was going to be like hitting the axe through that door when she's like hiding in the bathroom. So yeah, you see that and you're gonna act terrified, but like, you know, let your actor who is going to act like she's scared know, so she can do her job and act and not have a real life trauma response to what you're putting her through. Yeah, like that's pretty shitty. All that aside, I still think it's just a fine film. It's okay. Mm-hmm. Like, I was hoping that, because, again, maybe it's just because it's kind of hyped up for me, and, like, everyone talks about The Shining, so I'm like, cool, this is going to scare me. And it still didn't. And maybe I just have a high tolerance for scares, but, like, every little thing. And that's what I was talking about earlier with the music. Like, sometimes the music would hype up, and, like, you can just tell in the music, like, something's going to happen when it gets to this crescendo. And then I'm like, okay, I'm listening, and then either nothing will happen or like the littlest thing will happen. Right. Like there was one like crescendo that hit like when Jack like takes a page out of the typewriter, and I was just like, I'm sure that was supposed to be like a little jump thing, but I'm like, okay. The cinematography was really good. Jack Nicholson, he did a really good job of being someone who was absolutely insane. Like, I looked at his facial expressions and I'm like, if I were a 5-year-old kid, I would be terrified of him. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I don't know. It was okay. It was okay. Yeah. I do have a note here so there's a scene. I started laughing when I was watching it because I thought it'd be funny if in the scene where Wendy's looking through all the papers that say all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, like she just for like 3 minutes she's just like she's looking through the papers and like they all say the same thing, but she keeps going through all the papers and is like shocked. Yeah. I think that they should have like had an ongoing loop of her just going through all of the pages for as long as they could just to see if anyone would notice.
Yeah, like
just and that's just the rest of
the film. She's just going. Like the credits roll, like she's still going.
I'll work and I'll play. Just like, yeah.
The way that'd be like a more profound Kubrick ending though. I feel like that would probably like that would be even more believable for me. Like if you ended it that way, I'd be like, wow, that's art.
Also another thing I didn't like about the film is that they changed the ending.
Yeah, they did. They did.
When like Jack hits Halloran on the chest with an axe, I was like, how is he supposed to believably survive that?
He's not.
Fucking doesn't. And I'm like, what? Why are you killing it? He's supposed to live.
No, he was supposed to be like the hero in the movie, in the book. Yeah.
So that was really annoying. I talked about this in the Hill House with like the Haunting adaptation, but they changed another stupid thing which made no sense. It was room 237 in the movie, and then the book is 217. It bothers me so much. Like, why can't you just have the number correct? This is like, why was that necessary?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I know that whatever, hold on, Manny, stop eating microplastics. Come here.
How else is he supposed to grow into a big, strong boy?
That's a really good question. Yeah, it was weird that they changed the ending, and like I just feel like the adjustments that were made in the movie were just, they were choices. Like there were some choices. Like I will say, like with regards to the Kubrick Stare, I feel like that was one of my favorite parts of the movie, and to this day, like whenever I see that meme or like whenever I see a GIF someplace, I just go me. Like I just go me. Like I'm Shane Dawson, because it's just like I feel like. I feel like him in that, not Shane Dawson, but I just feel like Jack Nicholson in that scene where he's just like looking out into the snow at his wife and son with lifelessly.
There's something very comical about his frozen face at the end too. Like I burst out laughing.
It's like, so good.
Okay.
It's a choice.
What we're doing, I guess.
It's a choice, and it does make me a little upset that the hotel didn't explode like it does in the book. To the extent that, like, I forgot that doesn't happen in the movie, and then when I watched Dr. Sleep, I was like, that exploded, and then it was there again, and I was like, why is it still there? So, yeah, much harder to explain that when you do a sequel. Kubrick didn't think about that, did he?
No.
But I guess with regards to Dr. Sleep, if you at home have read The Shining and are a fan of The Shining and are wondering if Dr. Sleep is worth it, I don't know. I mean, like, if you're a Stephen King fan, probably, sure. But if you're a Shining fan, I would probably say, like, the book goes in a very different and unexpected direction. I'd almost say it's a little more sci-fi. It's not like as much like an American Gothic classic horror book that, you know, I appreciate. Like it kind of is missing some of the elements that I liked about The Shining. Obviously, you don't want to create the exact same book, but something that Stephen King notes in the author's note is like, I've always wondered what happened to Danny, and this is what I think happened. And whenever I hear him say that in the author's notes, I'm like, really? This is what you think happened to him? This is what you think happened to him after all of this?
Sometimes we don't need sequels.
No. I will say Mike Flanagan's adaptation is very interesting and does, much like Kubrick, contrast a lot from King's interpretation of the sequel, in part because, like, he's closing a lot of the loops that Kubrick's film maybe didn't, but also because, like, Mike Flanagan loves killing people I love, and where Stephen King was like, they all live at the end, Mike Flanagan was like, no. That's it.
That's unfortunate.
No one lives. They all die. So, I mean, I would say watch the movie and then maybe read the book if you really, like, are that immersed in Stephen King's writing, and if you haven't read it yet, and if you really, like, give a shit that much about what Stephen King thinks happens to Danny Torrance at the end of all of this. Exactly. Did you hear him?
Yeah.
Manny is also, like, a diehard Stephen King hater, so...
Yeah, he was paying attention to the film.
He was.
A lot.
It's also funny because Stephen King starts, like, the author's notes for, or, like, the dedication for Dr. Sleep by talking about how
Manny.
Don't worry about him. By talking about how he used to be a Fredman for, I can't remember the name of the artist, but whoever wrote Werewolves of London. And
really?
He dedicates the book to that artist, to that musician. And... why?
Why not?
Why? Like, okay. So there's that. Anyway, how many blah 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 do you give this book?
I actually give the book 4 blah blah blahs out of 5 because I was just like, the more I read it, I kept saying to my mom, I'm like, I like this more than I thought I was going to. Like, I thought I was gonna be like, either I'm not gonna get spooked, or I am going to get spooked and I'm not going to like it, or this is just going to be a boring story. I didn't know what to expect, but the more I read, the more I was enjoying it, and I thought it was a really cool story. And yeah, I feel like, having not read and probably never will read another Stephen King novel in my life, I think this is his best novel.
You close the book, you go, well, I'm done.
Yeah, I said I read 1 book of his. I'm good. I'm good.
I think
What about you?
I'd say, like 3.5 for me out of 5 blah blah blahs. That's a placeholder for me not being able to come up with a better rating system for this episode. I think part of me that's pretentious is doing the Spider-Man meme thing at Stephen King, where I'm like, you're the pretentious one, and he like points back at me in my psyche, and he's like, no, you are, and I'm like, yeah, probably. But to the extent that that's true, I'll own it. I am pretentious, and I don't like reading other people's pretentious books. I feel like I'm just not a Stephen King person. And I will say, from having read some other books in our little horror genre this October, I think there are other spookier books that we can look forward to.
Ooh.
So that concludes our episode. Thank you for listening to Lit by Moonlight. Tune in next time when we go to college to get more knowledge with Ninth House.